so wonderful to see you here.
Yeah, thank you. Richard and Jacob find themselves coincidentally both in Marrakesh. Richard on holiday and Jacob on jury. So they're not here. They must think they're movie stars or something. But Michael Imperioli is.
Good evening.
I would love to start with you, Paul. The film is, of course, dedicated to Russell Banks, and you adapted one of his works earlier, Affliction, in the 90s. Tell us a little bit about what brings you back to one of his works with this movie 30 years after.
Yeah, that's it. That's I would spend a week up with him every summer in Keith Valley in the Adirondacks where he lived. And it was always a lot of fun. He would have interesting guests, Paul Auster and William Kennedy and people. And I called him up and I said, what's a good week for this summer? And he said, it's not going to be this year because I've got cancer and taking chemo. And he had written a book about death, the dying process, while he was healthy, called For Go On. He had wanted to call it O Canada, but what's his name, Richard, was coming out with a book called Canada too, another New York author. And he died more or less the way he had researched. The same sort of cancer, the same kind of treatment, the same kind of time frame. He called the book My Ivan Illich. And so I said, I better read this book. Russell was sick. And I read the book, and then I said, this is what I should be doing. I was planning on doing something else. And then it's time to make my death film. You can't make your death film on your dying bed. You don't know that. You can write a death poem on your dying bed. You can't make a death film. I said, you gotta make your death film while you're still healthy. And so I said, I better make that death film before it's too late. And so that's how it all started, and I got, Russell was alive while I finished the script a week after he died, so we were in email correspondence all through the writing process.
And Michael, tell us a little bit about your process of coming on board this film and getting the script. What was your reaction?
Well, just having the opportunity to work with Paul Schrader was an exciting thing right from the beginning, even before I opened the pages. And right away, it's a very meditative, thoughtful, there's a stillness to it and just an honesty that came through. Richard and I have known each other for a number of years through the Tibetan Buddhist world, but never worked together, so that was very exciting to finally do something with him. But the scenes where we're filming the documentary, those were quite complicated, Paul, because that Interatron system, which was really going on, we were really using that. So Richard's looking into it, I'm looking into it, seeing him, he's seeing me, and then there's those cameras are running, then there were other cameras in the room that were running as well. So there was a lot of, that must have been a bit of a mind.
Well, he put it in the book. The book he's just giving this interview. And, a lot of screen time, trying to way to make it more interesting. And I know Aaron Morris, and I've seen him work with his Directorial. I said, you get Eric's gizmo up here, because that's much more cinematic with two huge pieces of machinery, and I can get a lot more angles and a lot make it the movie much more interesting. So I just borrowed the Directorial from him.
And in addition to using the Intertron, there are other interesting visual ideas and textures in the movie. You go from color to black and white, and there are different aspect ratios that you utilize. So could you talk a little bit about weaving those into the visual language of the film?
Well, Russell's book is a mosaic of memory and confabulation and true and false memories. The only other mosaic film I made was Mishma, where you have all these things. And he didn't have the tools as a writer that I had. When you write a book, what can you do? You know, italics, all capitals, change the font. But in film, we got to do a lot of stuff. And so you can change the screen ratio, you can degrade the film, you go black and white, you can make the film older or more resonant, you know, and change the color palette of the sets. So and whenever a director decides to use that kind of complex scheme, it's not because he wants to be complex, because he's trying to simplify something that is complex. So you have a 1:4:4 of the final day in that kind of gory Willis Hughes. Then you have a widescreen of the trip from Richmond to the border in overexposed Owen Royman kind of film. Then you have some black and white memories, and then you have a weird little section with his son, which I all did in that Bergman red orange, Ingmar Bergman. So it had 4 different styles, and you do this sort of by instinct. You know, you think it will work, but you never really know. You think, I think this will work. And fortunately, I get it so people would be less confused, and it has served that purpose.
And Michael, your character Malcolm is, obviously a filmmaker, but also a student, Vander's former student, as well as he's doing almost a bit of a journalistic work. So there are different impulses in him in filming this. I'm wondering how you engaged and tapped into these different headspaces.
There's a bit of a vampiric element, I think, to the documentarians, my character, my wife's character, and you're really trying to get what you can that's going to be not just interesting, I think, from my character's point of view, but sensational, something very exciting, and the crown jewel of that would be having him die on camera. That would be, wow, we did that, because we know he's very sick, and
yeah, he in fact says to your character, I forget the phrase he uses, but something about he'd be the toast of Canada, and you're going, I died on screen.
Yeah. I mean, so is that art? That element of it, or is that, so there's that playing with that ambition, and Richard's character says that Malcolm and his wife were students together, that she was the one really with a lot of the talent. He was more, an ambitious someone who kind of convinced her that he had talent. But so what exactly is it is he doing there? Is he telling the story? What is he trying to get? And it was interesting playing in that. I think he justifies it to himself as he's an artist, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we did those flip-flops in the casting. The girl who is Sloan, the assistant of the interview, he cast her then as his first wife, same actress, Penelope Mitchell. I don't know if some people did catch that. The girl with purple hair and the girl with blonde, the same girl. And then he cast his current wife at one point as the wife of his boyhood friend. And then he started casting himself at the age of around 50, 55 in some of these scenes. Because he doesn't remember himself as an old man. He still thinks he's a young man, and not as young as the Lordy. So then you see him. So we had that one delicious day of shooting with Christine Forsett, where in the morning we shot a scene with her in bed with Jake. In the afternoon we shot a scene with her in bed with Richard. And I said to Christine, I said, you're never going to forget this day.
So could you talk a little bit about casting both Richard Gere and Jacob Elordi? You know, you obviously have American Gigolo with Richard Gere about 45 years ago, I think. So this is not just your return to an author that you adapted from before, but then also an actor you worked with before.
Yeah, I mean, after American Gigolo, Richard blew up and had a number of huge hits and was involved in getting large salaries and doing big budget films. And so he was sort of out of my neighborhood. You know, we stayed in contact and friends, but I couldn't compete with, you know. And then I wrote this, I got this book and I was thinking, you know, how to try to raise money on it, how to put some buzz to it. Where's the buzz? You know, Anthony Hopkins could do this, but we've seen Anthony Hopkins do it. We've seen Jonathan Price do it. We've seen Tommy Lee Jones do it. But Richard has never played old. And wouldn't that be cool? What would it be? So that I could go to Richard and say, I got a very cool idea for you. I think it's time for you to play old and die. And of course he's an actor, so that's like catnip for him. You know, it's just the challenge of it.
And what about Jacob Elordi? I mean, there aren't a lot of young actors who could play young Richard Gere or someone who might be the young Richard Gere. How did you cast him?
Okay, I mean, I'm going to tell a story I told at NPR. I'm going to tell it again, just because it's a good story. I'm friends with Bret Easton Ellis. And Bret has a fascination with American Gigolo. He written about it in his books, he talked about it. It was his coming out film. So I was having dinner with Bret in Los Angeles. I said, you know, I'm trying to cast a young Richard Gere. And he said, oh, you can't do that again. No way you're going to cast a young Richard. There is no young Richard Gere. I said, yeah, I know. But I just zoomed with this interesting actor, Jacob Elordi. And Bret went, stop right there. I just came in my pants. So I knew I had the right guy.
I'm glad I asked that question. And I heard you address this elsewhere. I think you mentioned that Russell could be, you know, very self-critical in autobiography form. So, given you were friends and given you were adapting from something semi-autobiographical for him, I'm wondering if you had impulses to maybe protect him a little bit, or did you bring anything from yourself in changing some of the maybe harsher criticisms that he had towards himself?
It's sort of the opposite. He had written an autobiography called Odyssey. So a lot of the stuff in this book, if you read the autobiography, the two wives, the children, wanting to go to Cuba, all of that, on a road trip out west. So, but I didn't think, he seemed to think he was a real shit. I said, you're not bad enough, Russell. You're coming off as too good. And I said, you need to do something really bad. And so then I added that scene where he turns on his son. Now that's biblical. It's evil biblical where he's turning on your son. And chased his widow. You know, Russell had a little bit of a problem with that. And then afterward, Chase said to me, after he saw the movie, he said, yeah, you were right, you know, because Russell painted a bad picture of himself, but it wasn't really bad enough. You know, it had to become darker.
And Michael, since essentially, at least to me, at the heart of this film is an artist looking back, you know, trying to remember his artistic endeavors, his past lives. I'm wondering, as an artist yourself, having made this film, encourage you to sort of maybe take a pause and look back at your career. Are you an actor who kind of looks back and takes pauses, or are you more in the moment?
Well, I'm an Aries, and they don't like looking backwards. You know, like if I'm in a train or a car or something, I have to face forward. I can't face the back. I get physically sick. It's kind of like that, and I'm looking ahead. Once in a while, you know, if you go to a screening of something or something shows and you see it, it can be okay, but I avoid it a bit.
Well, you know, one of the ones when you do the same scene, I said to Nick Cage, or I did scroll photos with Nick, I said, are there any scenes you have not played? Because he works a lot. Nick thought, wow, I said, no, I can't think of anything. I think virtually everything I get out of the script, I've done this scene once before in some movie or other.
I guess so.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And Paul, I really would love to also ask about the music that you use in the film. There's a beautiful sense of kind of stillness and melancholy, and it's a very gentle sound that we hear. How did you work with the musicians to find the sound for this film?
Well, I tend to like to work with first-time composers because they're facing all these problems for the first time. There's not that many problems for composers. Scared, romantic, scary, eerie, you know, you can plug it in. But if you get somebody who's never done it before, then it's a challenge. How do I do eerie music, you know? And so I've tended over the years to use people from Jack Nietzsche, George Moroder, Angelo Badalamenti, Devontae Hines, Michael Bean, David Grohl. Use people who had never done it before. And I had heard Phosphorescent several years ago at Brooklyn Steel. I really liked them. And I thought, you know, I'd also like to do a song cycle, which I did in Light Sleeper, which is you have the plot arc, the narrative arc, and then you have the character arc, and then you have the dialogue arc, then you have the VO arc, and then on top of that you put a music arc of songs. So it's all that layering, and then therefore the lyrics in the songs and the voiceover can all sort of echo each other. You have to be careful that nothing is on the nose. It all has to be off the nose. But movie lyrics are by their very nature not on the nose.
And I'm also thinking of this film in relation to some of your last few films. First Reformed, Card Counter, Master Gardener. I think you refer to them as an unofficial trilogy. I think it was called Man in Room. But this also relates to them, but you're not considering this confessional, redemptive movie that relates to them as part of that trilogy. So I'm wondering if you could open that up a little bit.
Well, those are monocular films. I call them that because you're just looking through one eye and the progression of a character. And I didn't set out to write a trilogy, but somewhere along the line, I realized I was doing one. I was talking to Pablo Rain the other night, and I said, "When did you realize you were doing a trilogy of these women?" And he said, when I started writing the script about cows, I realized, in fact, I was engaged in a trilogy. So I had the similar thing. And now I've lost track of my train of thought, but what was the question?
The question is that this is outside of that trilogy, but
Oh,
the
yeah.
theme still relates to those three
That was
movies.
my thinking. I can't do, critics like trilogies. They don't like tetralogies. I can't do a
That's
fourth
true.
one. I can't do a fourth one. I've got to do something different. An adaptation, stereoscopic film, not a monocular film. Film with different points of view and angles at events. So it was intentionally written and directed to be different from those films. But of course, we are who we are, and a number of people said to me at an earlier screening today, saying that called it the capstone, the epilogue of those three films, and I said it was meant to be just the opposite. But it's hard to change their stripes.
I think we have time for a couple of audience questions. Let's see. I see one hand over there. Yeah.
For Michael, you kind of answered a question I had when you said you already knew Richard, but I was just wondering the relationship dynamic between you guys as actors, because for your characters there's a lot of tension, and I just wanted to know if you could speak to that.
Well, I think there's a lot of reverence from my character to his, really, what he's accomplished and how he executed his works. And I have that for Richard, both as an actor, looking at an actor like him who's accomplished so much throughout a very long career. But also, like I said, we know each other from the Tibetan Buddhist community. Richard's someone who's the Gere Foundation, which has really made major contributions to Tibetan people, to the culture, but also to the Dharma and to Buddhism itself, and including translations of books and publishing and.
Yeah, he's been part of every year over there.
Yeah, in India. He goes and he'll sit, he'll go, he's not staying in a fancy hotel, he's in a monastery somewhere and is sitting like everybody else, on the floor and doing things sometimes in remote places as well. What he's contributed to the Dharma and to Buddhism has always been really impressive, and I kind of tap into those things.
Thank you. I see a hand over there. Yes, you.
Yeah. Is there a reason why the Richard Gere character cast his wife as his childhood friend's wife? What was the thinking?
Sorry, say it again. Richard Gere's character cast his wife as.
Why did Richard Gere's character cast his wife as his childhood friend's wife in the country?
First of all, because that was in Russell's book, but I like that in Russell's book. This idea that I've spent my life getting people to say things they wouldn't tell others. And I can't, now it's my turn. But I can't tell the truth. Unless the camera is on, and unless my wife is listening. That was a conceit in the foregoing of the book. And I liked it, I kept it, I like that idea that after a lifetime of filming others and manipulating other events to fit a documentary structure, now it's your turn. And he wants his wife to hear this version of it. He at some point he thinks it's the truth. I don't necessarily think it is either. I don't know if she thinks it is, she keeps saying, you're confused, you know.
Do we have time for one more? Probably more. Yes, you over here.
As a viewer, I was startled when Richard goes from the interview with the father-in-law, and he goes back into the bedroom with his pregnant wife, and all of a sudden it wasn't Richard young, it was Richard, an older Richard. And what made you want to do that, where he's fondling the stomach, but it's an older Richard?
He's remembering it. In the first part of the memory, he sort of remembers himself as younger. But in the second, when he comes back to memory again, he sees himself in his 50s. So he's now back in there, but he's playing himself at 27. But he is in his 50s, and so, it was those kind of tricks, like when he walks over to the house and Richard Dexter's frame and Jake Inger's frame, a kind of interchangeability in memory of how you see yourself there, and also it gave me a chance not to show Richard being handsome, not to have him in a wheelchair and the death mask on all the time.
Yes, you're on front.
There's a line early on in the film when young Richard is at a party and someone says that without color, a film is emotionless, like emotion is color. And I'm wondering if that relates to you putting some scenes in black and white and some scenes in color.
Did everyone hear the question?
No.
There's a line in the movie about emotion and color. If a film without color is emotionless, and whether that pertains to some of the black and white scenes in the movie.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of that, but also just young people that age, college age, in some beer party. And they are having these theoretical discussions of art. I remember them well from my college days, It wasn't all about, boobs and bones. There was a lot of serious discussion going on, and I'd like to convey that.
I think we're almost out of time, but Paul, I would love to ask you as the last question, what are you working on next? Do you have any scripts that you're working on right now?
I have been in a zone. Today was the first time I didn't write in almost 8 weeks. I've written 2 original scripts in the last 8 weeks, and I've rewritten them in 8 weeks. So I've been on fire. I